Okay, so tonight, a little bit of an update again, following on the terrains thing. So what I've done is I've added a few more things. Last night where I left off was I'd done these stoneworks. So what I've done today is if I zoom in here, I'm showing the difference. I did a little cleanup on my grass textures. And you can see here, I thought I would show you the difference between a grass texture with and without adding the bump map. Because what the bump map does is adds depth to it. And I know I've told you this before, but here just is a good way to show it as an example. So this grass that I'm on right now is just the normal texture file that is associated with my grasses, and then they get modified either in engine and with bump map or with a mask map. What a mask map does is let you kind of see layers below, let some things shine out and rather than others in certain places. I haven't really used a lot of that yet, but that's more for like ice and water and things like that, not quite used so much in solid objects. That being said, so this is what the grass looks like without the bump map, with the pattern fixed up a bit. And then this is what it looks like with the bump map. So you can see that it gives it a bit more depth. Oh, sorry. It gives it a bit more three-dimensional depth, but it also blocks it up a bit. So if I go over this way and you can see the two, you can see that the one without the 3D bump to it doesn't quite look 3D-ish, right? Like it doesn't have that pop, but it has more detail in the actual texture. So depending what you're using it for, if you want that pop and you don't care about it being just a little more blocky, and the reason it is because when you add a normal map or a bump map, I keep calling it a bump map, in this case it's a normal map, they're almost the same thing. I know someone's going to scream at me that they're not, but they get almost the same job done, just in a different way. But what happens is a pixel gets offset to bring it higher, or a pixel gets offset to bring it lower optically, like it's an optical illusion. And so what that does is basically one pixel becomes three. So over here, where you've got this fine detail on my grass and ground texture that I created, over here where you make it pop to give it that 3D-ness to it, you lose that. You're basically cutting it into a third of the detail, because what you're doing is you're offsetting for height and for depth, and then you got your middle ground there. So that's why they look dramatically different. But this is a good thing, because somebody might be going, oh no, well, you lose so much texture, why would you do it? It's like you lose the detail. But you get dramatically different looks. So when I zoom out here, you can see that this looks patchy and more like it's underground, right? Like that would be under a tree canopy or more of a mossy or a licheny type. Whereas this would be more of a, I don't know, in a town park or a lawn that the dog peed on a lot or something, right? I mean, just patchy grass, patchy brush grass or forest grass, well, more wild, right? More rugged. So you've got uses for it. And now that brings me to the next thing I'm working on here. And these I don't have, these are all just flat right now because I haven't done any normal map for them, because I just kind of wanted to show the leaf pattern on. I don't know how that's going to look when I do the normal map, so I just brought them in to show the textures. They're a work in progress, but it's a variety of a couple of spring, summer, a little bit into fall, late fall sort of idea, and then 3 different stoneworks, just base stoneworks without the leaf pattern on them. And so I think that that'll come in handy for people as groundwork. And I don't have them raised up here, but they're just a typical dirt ground pattern underneath if you were to raise it up or throw it on a slope or do whatever. Nothing fancy. It's just a 256 tile, 128 for the top and a 128 for the dirt. Nothing fancy on those. There's no need to. Now, where the fancy comes in is over here now. Went back to working on my tree designs. so that you could build forests out of the terrain without compromising for having tons and tons of models in place. I mean, if you've got giant tall trees or cut off stumps or whatever you're working on, I decided let's get some really good, the tile set lends itself to some really good tree shapes. So I did, standardized kind of, I don't know if you'd call it a hemlock or a fir or whatever here, maybe even a cedar to a bit. So just plain, nothing fancy to it, good filler, especially in the distance. Then I did a deciduous tree, so coniferous tree, generic, deciduous tree, generic. Although I use so birch is a little more tan, white. Alder is a little more yellow, slightly orangey maybe. So I kind of compromised and I went with the birch, and I found a pattern that I liked. It was a little more towards like a peeling alder. So it could be a poplar, it could be a birch, it could be, you could use whatever. And again, these don't use bump maps, these particular ones. These are just the texture file. I actually found that it looked better just using the texture file on these than bump mapping them. But I will create, normal maps. I will create normal maps in case you want to use that look. It's not a problem. They will be included in the texture pack. The next one here, this is another deciduous tree, a little bit aged, a little bit growing, it's got some green on it, some moss growing on it, just different variety. Then over here, we've got another one. Now these ones are up taller. So this one here, it's got some vines and stuff growing at the bottom. You can see the leaves and stuff growing up a bit. And then a little bit on the side maybe. And then at the top, you've got a little bit growing around up at the top there. If you wanted to leave it as a cut off or do whatever, I mean, it's up to you. It just adds a little more character to it. And then I decided to carry that on a little bit more here instead of just having a little bit around the stump ridge. And you can see there's a couple different types of stumps I've used for the deciduous, the shorter trees here, and then going into the bigger, older ones. And then, so a little greener, a little older, a little cracked. This one here, you can see that I don't have the bottom on the vine growing up on the bottom. That is more at the top and then coming down the body of the mossy tree trunk. Over here I have the same thing, just taller with a little different pattern on the side. You've got a little extra happening with it. Multiple layer, just variety, right? You've got this coming up here in the middle and another vine. Let me just zoom in on that, show you a little vine. See another vine coming up on the side. You don't have that on this variety. So just some variety, and you can flush out the forest and stuff. And again, you can, there'll be a model probably in one of the model packs that's a treetop for that, or some branches or something. I mean, there's lots of things you could do there. Now on to the next thing. Again, these will be bump mapped out. But the next thing here is, I just wanted to show you the stuff in use and using it with the existing model packs. Come past the stuff I used yesterday. We're just going to zoom in and rotate up a bit. And we're just going to walk forward down this forest path. A little bit mossy. There's some leaves. There's some leaves on the path. Right? And the leaves get a little denser as you get towards the tree. There's the tree trunk, the vines on it. If I look up, no, I have to back out a bit to look all the way up, I guess. If you look up, there's the vines at the top. And again, that's why it's not necessarily needed for to have tops on these. And then you can see that there's some grasses, some mushrooms, there's some fog, there's some fireflies floating around, a few fairy lights, some grass, some fiddleheads over there, mushroom. And I used one of these trees as a stump here. And again, I used the bushy undergrowth, and you can see how that ties together quite nicely with the with all the ferns and the mushrooms and the bushes and stuff, and the fog there. Like, it looks pretty foresty. You can do a pretty good job. And there's a stump coming out of the ground with the ivy crawling all over it. Mushrooms growing out of the top. Over here's you got some more ferns, some more plants, another grass in the back. But there you go. that's basically what I wanted to show you, and just to give you a little bit of a demo of how you could use these assets, really flesh out a scene. I think they look really good, and then of course from here, you know, you're looking in the, we'll just zoom out a little bit, you know, in the background, in the distance there, you've got the rest of the forest all there. You can do a lot, and they're not models. You're not using up a huge amount of polygons and triangles and resources. You've got some pretty basic textures. Each of these files is, let me just look. Let me just take a looky here. Click, properties. Yeah, we are talking, that's 400K for the big one. For this one that goes multiple levels up. And for the ones that aren't 400K, they're just the smaller ones, you were talking 200K. So these are tiny, tiny files. So you can imagine flushing out a whole terrain, a whole map with a bunch of these to fill space and to give you that forest, you know. Here I am, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Here I am walking through the forest. You know, go for a little walk past the trees. Here we go. Walking in the trees. I mean, you can do a lot of storytelling using these terrain assets, and hopefully you agree with me and that this will be an awesome addition to the Back and Pack 2. Have a great night.